So today I'm going to present about the Azure databases. What are the databases are available and they are in detail view. So let's look into the agenda of it. What are the major topics I'm going to cover through the Azure database session? Initially about the introduction of the Azure database services. Afterwards, key features and benefits. What are the databases support engines available in the Azure? Cost optimization and pricing models, security in database service, performance optimization, deployment options, Azure database backup solution, data recovery strategies, and finally, use cases. So let's move on to the introduction of the Azure database services. As you can see, we are in our as developers, we are using databases in everywhere to store data and process it. But if we used in the local environment, we can sometimes lose the data. So to avoid that major issue, the cloud computing providers providing the services to able to store in the cloud. As likewise, Azure also one of the most uh, most important provider which providing the database services, especially Azure SQL and Azure Cosmos databases. So if you see, the normally the database services are fully managed, scalable, and having the mostly relational databases to manipulate and provide support for various workloads. Next is we will look into key features and benefits. When we using Azure databases, what features are there? By using this, what benefits we can able to get? First one is scalability. By using the scalable option, we can scale up or down based on the workload we provide to the that specific database. Next is high availability and disaster recovery. Through this, we can able to get the availability of the database where we can duplicate in different type of regions. In disaster recovery, as I mentioned, based on region duplication of the regional wise, we can backup and store the currently used databases. If we consider the usage of the databases, it easy to manipulate where it provide many developer tools like SDKs to access the Azure database and which help to automate the process of creating and managing databases through the build pipelines. Next is cost efficiency, where the Azure databases provided many variety pricing options. By based on our budget, we can provide which model we have to go. Like example, pay as you go. In next, there are managed services are available where we can manage both Azure SQL and Azure Cosmos database together, like manage identity. Next is security and compliance, which provide the various security features like and certifications like ISO verified certification and able to authenticate Azure Active Directory based support for the database also, which avoid third party access. Next is global reach, where it have the support for multiple regions like South Asia and Europe and USA. Likewise, we can deploy the database wherever we want. Finally, the database service provide the much support in analytics services as well as AI related services, where by connecting them and we can manipulate the data and get the final results the way we wanted. Let's look into the supported database services, how it is there. So here you can see in this diagram the most supported databases available. So here, other than SQL database, we have MySQL, MariaDB, PostgreSQL, and Cosmos DB. This Azure SQL is managed through managed instance and virtual machine also. And the SQL database also support SQL data warehouse facility. In here, this data factory also able to interconnect with Azure SQL database directly, where we can process ETL approaches like data syncing from one one type of database to other. Example, if you want to sync from MySQL, so by using data factory, we can sync from MySQL to Azure SQL database. These databases are secured by either Azure Active Directory or Azure Security Center. And we can migrate the data by using Azure Data Migration Services. Also, to monitor what are the operations or if any failures are occurring during the transaction, we can use monitoring services to avoid any big disaster happening. We can creating alert, we can get the alerts through emails, and log analytics where we able to retrieve day-to-day activities what happened through when we using the single database. Let's look into the next section, which is pricing models. Here I am selected pricing models, cost optimization, security, performance, because these are the major concepts we have to look when we deciding to create or going to use a cloud-based database. So in Azure, the following pricing models are available. So one is pay as you go, which is the consume-based pricing. That means whatever the resources or SQL database transaction we have used, based on that, the pricing will be calculated. Next is reserve capacity, which is the predictable based services. Like, for example, if we select for the web app, if we're going to use app service and one database, so this setting is predictable. So this much is going to be used. So likewise, the reserve capacity models will be available to use the cost effective way. Next is serverless SQL full, which is for query execution based resources. Another option is for the Cosmos DB available consumption based, where the based on the actual usage of Cosmos DB base, which will be available to calculate the cost, how much we need to pay. Next is Azure SQL Database Serverless, which is also similar to the previous one, will be calculated how much resource we have consumed. The another one is Azure Hybrid Benefit, which we normally will not able to use. This will be for able to use the on-premises license, where when we using the enterprise level SQL databases, so by using that license, we can integrate Azure SQL database also. This will provide to avoid major cost survey cost. And next is the spot pricing, which is a bit cost effective and which will be helpful low priority workloads. For example, data batch processing related stuff. And finally, we are having dev and test pricing, or all of you all already know that is for the developer based uh, usage, where it can be used for the non-production environment to test how is the to test and verify how the data transaction is working as fine. So next, I'm going to explain about how these pricing models can be optimized by reducing the cost. Pay as you go pricing, which I already explained, that is the commonly used pricing model, which will regularly monitor the resource consumption and adjust resources as needed to avoid over provisioning. Like the needed, if we restrict the needed, then it will, based on that, it will reduce the workloads, and only for the actual usage only it will consume. Next is reserve capacity. This one is for significantly lower the cost over the time, as this is supporting the predictable workload based cost calculation. And another one is, as I already mentioned, serverless SQL pool. This is also for query based execution. For the query, what are the resources needed? So that likewise the cost for SQL pool serverless option will be decided. And for the Cosmos DB based, consumer based, it will be calculate how much throughput we used and the storage we have used based on demand. So that, based on that, the total cost will be calculated. And for the Azure SQL Database Serverless, it is also similar likewise. Based on actual resource consumption, the how much we have to pay, it will be calculated. And Azure Hybrid benefit, since it is using the on-premises SQL Server licenses, so this will be a predefined cost. So it will not charge extra charges. And for the spot pricing, this also option to reduce the cost, where it can be used for the non-critical workloads. And finally, dev test and pricing. This is a lower cost one, where this can be mostly used for development purpose. Let's move on to the next section, which is Azure Database Security, Service Security. There are multiple options provided by Azure, so we'll look into one by one at later. So initially, first one is authentication and authorization. So here, there are several options available for the Azure database related authentication, which are Azure Active Directory based, SQL authentication, and managed identity. By using either of it, we can restrict the access to the database and also provide role-based access control to various methods which will reduce even restrict whether whenever the user is logging to the Azure portal, if the user has that role, particular role, then only that user can able to access to the database. Data encryption. The data encryption is encrypted if the data is on flow or if it is not in the transaction level. In the data at rest mode, the transparent data encryption way is used, and for the in transit mode, SSL or TLS based safeguard will be used. Next is threat detection and auditing. It offers built-in threat detection to identify and respond potential security threats in real time. When we using, if there is attacker is attacking to the database, so it will immediately detect and notify through alerts or log analytics system how how this threat is affecting to the database storage. Next is advanced threat detection, which is the advanced version of it, which provide supportive for if there is unusual activities are there or SQL injection based attacks, and also potential security vulnerabilities are, if anything happen, this advanced threat detection option will be detect and produce the report of it. Next is network security, which is specifically provide Azure DDoS protection, and also Azure Security Center also available to add security layers of it to protect against the distributed denial of service and other security threats. Finally, the data masking option, which will control who is the person able to access the data, who able to read the data. So likewise, these options are available to the security. And meanwhile, there are other options also. As I already mentioned, it will provide the certifications like ISO based, SOC based, HIPAA based certification. By this, we can verify that this database related operations are securely managed. In the patch management, the database related services always to be up to date, where it can adhere the latest attacks if anything occurs. In the Azure Security Center, as I mentioned, it is supporting the threat intelligence by support of AI. So it can predict the threats, or it can help to avoid the on real time threats which attacking to the Azure Database Services. By following best practices, we can strongly protect our data, also taking considering how we can backup and how we can recover from the disaster. This also should be considered when we securing our data which saved in the database. So let's look into how we can optimize the Azure database performance. First is we have to choose the right service tier, which is a DTU based or VCO based on the user requirements. If it's a general purpose, we normally choose DTU based. If it's any high level business purpose, we will normally choose VCO based service tier. Next is indexing and query optimization. In SQL, there are when we using the multiple joins by using indexes in one particular table keys by combining them, we can speed up the query speed. In auto tuning, this this will be help to database to optimize the performance without manual intervention. Caching strategies, caching the database data, which will be frequently reduce the database load. In scalability, if we scale up the database or down based on the workloads which is used in the database querying, this feature will be helped to optimize the performance. In resource governance, the resource governor feature which will be help to allocate resources more efficient way. And query data caching option helpful at the application layer to reduce the frequency of data requests, especially for read heavy workloads. In application design, when we designing the architecture of the application like our projects, so in there we can, by the design of that, we have to think how by using minimal db codes how we can achieve the user requirement purpose. And finally, the connection pool option will help to improve the performance by using the same connection to by repeating it. So these are the highlighting points which will be have to consider when we thinking to optimize the performance of the database. And let's look into the deployment options, how we going to deploy the Azure SQL database. So here, as at first, the single database option is available for standalone databases, which will be used for the performance level prediction, predictable performance for the application that already deployed. Here, the scalability able to support as it's a single standalone database, so we can scale up or down the way we need it. As for the cost model, here we can use pay as you go based on the resources which is allocated for the single database. In next, the elastic pool option will support many databases at as a one pool, where when we this is mainly used where we have to share the resource usage for the multiple databases. For the scalability option, since it is used shared resources, this will divided among the databases which are allocated in the elastic pooled. In isolation level, it having the lower isolation comparing to the single databases. Cost model, we can pay for it for the pool of resources. Since it is a cost efficient, so it will only consider the by selecting elastic pool it for that pool, those related cost only it will be consider, not for the single database. In the managed instance, it will be the SQL Server managed instance, mainly uses for applications that is requiring SQL Server related features, where in scalability wise, the computing resources can be scaled up or down. This is also similar to single database. It's highly isolated and compatible with SQL Server. The cost model here we can able to use and suitable is vCost based model. Finally, serverless based SQL pool, which is probably normally used for Azure Synapse Analytics. It is a serverless on-demand based pool for SQL queries. Mainly, it will be used for major applications like data warehousing, advanced analytic systems, and advanced queries. In scalability wise, it will be scalable to either by setting auto scale for the computer resource on demand. The resource will be isolated when we querying the database. When we querying the database, based on that, the resource will be isolated. As the cost model, based on query execution, the payment will be calculated. So these are the for SQL Azure SQL context. These are the mainly used uh, deployment options available. So based on the user requirements needed, we can choose what 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 is the deployment option available for that. And finally, we will look into the available database backup solutions. One is Azure Backup, which is a centralized and scalable one. Uh, can be used for various services. It is supported by automated backups to schedule backups and protect the data, and cross-region replication, where by replicating it's in region wise we can backup the data. And for the Azure SQL database backup, it is supporting built-in backup capabilities, which is also having the automated backups, where it can continuously provide short recovery point objectives, and also it provides geo-replication based backup, where it will create the secondary database in the different region, and point in time restore will be supported, where it will create a specific time of point in where we can restore the database. The next is Azure blob storage based backup, where we will already having the predefined storage account. By manually backupping our Azure SQL database, we can store there, and from the storing point, we can able to create the able to restore the database. And the another one is Azure Site Recovery. This one is specifically for the available for disaster recovery option, and also it will able to provide on-premises and Azure workloads. It able to provide cross-region failover if it fails from one region, and it will majorly divide the workloads over to the across the regions. And for the automation, it will provide recoveries where if some in one region, if it get failed, by the feed usage of automation, we can automate the process and utilizing the another region's resources to get the data that we wanted. Finally, we can use Azure Backup Center where it will monitor the health of the resource, and this will be easier for cost saving options. So these are the major Azure database backup solutions available. I will explain this on in the demos section. And finally, how we can able to recover the backup database from the restore points. So one is will be the regular backups. It will be it can be either automatic or it can be a manual backup. So scheduling this, we can able to get the we can able to restore or create a separate database from that, specifically using Azure Backup Tool, Azure SQL Database Backup Tool, or third-party libraries. And Azure point-in-time restore, it will recover the data from a specific point in time. If let's say if we back up a Azure SQL database from yesterday, so from the yesterday until yesterday, it will restore the data. In Azure Blob Storage Backup, as I mentioned earlier, it is a manual-based backup. Using it, we can manually restore the data, or from the Azure Blob Storage, we can restore the data. In geo-replication-based method, we can create the different type of copies in different regions where it can avoid major disasters. Where it mainly used for customized based backup presentation and data redundancy based problems. In Azure Site Recovery, it is also a most used and comprehensive disaster recovery for on-premises based workloads. This will be followed by creating a disaster recovery team and conducting regular testing for that, and having documented recovery procedures how we can recover. So like following these steps, the Azure site recovery method will be goes on. So for this one, there is Azure Site Recovery Services available. So by using this the Azure Database recover can be achievable. Finally, data archiving, which is archiving and managing historical data, which we already know. Like for example, we will be deleting the data, but in soft delete, with where we will be having the original data from our end. By using this, we can able to avoid the loss of data. This can be achieved by using Azure Blob Storage and Azure Data Lake Storage. And finally, we will look how the Azure databases can be applicable in normal common uses. First is web application and mobile apps. As developers, we already developing web application and mobile application. So to store the data and manipulate them, we can use cloud-based database. And for the data warehousing use case, by saving the old data, we can get analytics of it and the monthly, yearly reports, how the data is manipulated and how it is used to get a report of it. And for the Internet of Things, IoT solutions, we can directly get data from IoT device like sensor and logs data and telemetry data by saving them uh, in real-time analytics like synonyms analytics. So by using that, we can manipulate and create reports. In the gaming section, we also need to have the data because to store the scores and the transactions happening between games and players details. For those details, when we need to retrieve and make decisions, the databases will play a major role where it can be accessible from anywhere we wanted. Uh, and e-commerce purpose, where to handle the customer orders inventory based process, we can use the Azure databases. And the real-time analytics, healthcare and life sciences, also the cloud-based databases, which is really helpful to access the data from anywhere. In healthcare section, to access patient records, critical trial data, and other important informations can be used where this Azure database specifically provide security compliance related options. And for the geographical applications also we can use where it provides the support of having and manipulating the data like sharing the route of the location route of the ride. Likewise, for the use cases, it can be used. So in the reference section, I added the detailed way of doing the backup. So by referring this, guys, you can get an idea and do how the database this is happen. So let's have a small video how we can create the database. So here we will provide the all necessary details like the name and the server and the computer storage. And here we will provide what type of backup storage redundancy we needed. It can be either local redundant, zone redundant, or geo redundant. Majorly, the geo redundant would be useful. As I explained earlier, the geo redundant replica approach will be useful, which will create the copies from different regions. So in uh, networking, we have to select the allowing Azure services because by using that only we can access and access the data from the database through the app services or locally. And other settings should be in uh, default mode. By verifying the data, how this should be done and whether it's filled correctly. So by using this can be done. After finalizing the data, the database will be created successfully. So likewise, I have created one database. So here, uh, the created database you can see from the SQL server. So in here, we can set it up the relevant database backup options. Also, we can see what are the uh, available backups in here. So by in clicking the restore option, we can create the uh, restore the database of it. Also, in this databases, uh, we can, as I mentioned, in here we can uh, see what is the regular activity happen through the uh, in the database. Also, in metrics option, we can see how the CPU usage happen and if there are how much DTU is used, if there are any failure available. Likewise, we can see how much the database is used. So those are the major uh, things available. So those are the factors should be considered when we creating a database and using and having the backups of that particular database. So I hope this session will be useful for you all, and thank you for joining to the session.